David Ashford is here, and we're talking about the next year in government. And once again, I just mentioned that there's another interview about the tribunal. Well, you're not going to be staying a backbencher, I'm guessing. You're just not that sort of person.
Well, I don't know. It's not up to me, is it, Paul? I mean, I don't decide who's a minister, who's got government jobs. That's not my role.
Well, they're short on one, even as we speak, aren't they, technically? So they're not exactly flush with people.
Well, before you start getting excited, I've only just not long resigned as Treasury Minister. I think it'd be
there's
a bit strange.
What do you think is that
me
point?
coming back in? I don't know. Again, it's not for me to judge. It's not down to me whether I become a minister or not. And like I say, it doesn't bother me whether I'm a backbencher or a minister. I believe I can try and affect change in either role. The year ahead has got a huge amount of challenges, and we mustn't underestimate the fact we're facing some challenges that we haven't seen since the 1950s.
We'll come on more of that, but the way it's being done, does that not frustrate you that you have no input directly into Comey now, and you're sitting there watching Dr. Alex Allison having to stand up and do things, and sometimes you shake your head. I'm not sure necessarily about anything he's saying, but I can see you, body language-wise, going or whatever sometimes. So are you frustrated in that sense?
No, I'm not frustrated. I'm not always going to agree with my colleagues 100% of the time. I mean, the one thing I made very clear when I left as Treasury Minister is I'm not going to be a backseat driver. I'm not going to sit there advising Alex that he should be doing this or should be doing that. He's the Treasury Minister. He's got to make the decisions as to where he wants to go. There'll be some I agree with, and there'll probably be some I won't agree with. But that is politics, and that's the nature of the beast. But also, I'm not a shrinking violet, Paul. If I've got an issue, I will go and speak to the Minister of the department concerned. I don't just sit there seething in the background, going, "Oh, I don't agree with that." I hope my former ministerial colleagues from the old administration and this administration will always agree whenever I had a problem or there was something I fundamentally disagreed with. I would always go and speak to them and let them know what my thoughts and feelings are.
So you sit there in the backbenches, and it's a terrible term because you don't really have that many.
No.
Because you're on other things, aren't you? What are you staying on? What have you got in your portfolio? Anything?
Yes, so I'm a member of the Justice Committee.
Right. Okay. We are now thinking about this year ahead and what you are going to do as presumably a constituency member. Anything particularly you got in planned?
Well, actually, the things that I think, obviously continuing the constituency work. Like I say, there's the road traffic situation around several areas of the constituency that needs to be done. The state of the roads in some areas of the constituency as well needs to be tackled, and I will be pushing very strongly on that. I will also be pushing around the proposed changes to TT and how that impacts residents, because there are residents of Douglas North that with the timings are locked into the course when the races are on. So that has a huge impact on their lives during the racing periods. There's also...
Let's talk about that. What do you do? See more consultation, but what? Less road closures or...?
Well, I'm just a bit concerned at the moment with the proposed changes that are being proposed from next year to the TT and how that impacts residents. There's a consultation out at the moment, so we do have to state that. Government hasn't made a final decision yet, and I'll be watching very, very closely what comes back from that consultation, and I'll be looking for reassurance in some of those areas. But also, the big thing that will affect constituents, not just to Douglas North, but across the island, is the national issue and the national picture, such as the cost of living crisis and the support. I've never liked the phrase, the squeeze middle. I think I've stated that in Keys and Timble before, which you've probably listened to. I've said I don't like that phrase. But those who are middle income earners are going at the moment to be facing quite a tsunami of costs. Now, the government package that's being announced, I welcome it. I think there's some very good measures in there, but I just worry about the impact on people who are single without children, because just because they haven't got children or they're single, it doesn't mean their bills are halved or quartered, depending. They actually have, in some cases, higher costs because they're trying to pay for everything themselves. And I just worry what support's there for them. Are they the forgotten bunch? When we did the first round of cost of living support, we had to get that out quickly, and it was a short-term fix until we could get to the point in October where initially it was going to be me, but now Alex could make that statement as to what we were going to do over winter, and so we rightly focused on those who would be most immediately impacted. But the impact is now going to be much wider, and I also worry how that is going to filter through in terms of the economy, because if economic spend dries up, we've just announced as a government a economic strategy that is based around growth and encouraging people into the island. And to do that, we need to have a vibrant hospitality sector and retail sector.
How worried should we be on this then?
Well, I am very concerned that we need to ensure that we don't drive people to cut entirely their what you would call their discretionary spend, because I think that would have an economic impact that then has other long-term consequences.
I mean, what have you done? Would you done this thing about holding the price of electricity? Do you think that's a good idea? And where do you sit on the Manx gas thing and those sort of things?
Right, so in terms of Manx gas, I mean, the wholesale price of gas, for anyone who looks at the wholesale market, has gone to historically ridiculous levels. I was going to say historically high, but let's use the word ridiculous.
50 pence a therm up to what?
Well, it was
£5.
Well, yeah, it was roughly around about 45, 50 pence a therm about 18 months ago. You're now at the peak, I believe it's just under 500 pence. It nearly hit. It seems to settle roughly around about the 300, just under 300 pence.
Well, we're in summer, aren't we?
But it's still exceptionally high.
Yeah.
And how anyone can hedge forward
So what would you do?
based on that. So I do agree with the electricity the freeze. I think that's very sensible. Again, I will have more to say on that in Tynwald, because there are some things I want some clarity around in that, particularly with it being by loan.
And we're going to pay for it eventually, aren't we?
And I want to know what the impact in that is. But like I say, and again, they're pushing the benefits support for those on the low incomes, but it's that middle bracket I'm concerned about, and I will be looking for reassurance at the Tynwald sitting around single people and middle income earners, what actual support is going to actually be there for them.
It's like we see the numbers in government going up and things like that as well. Do you think the government should be the first people to be showing some restraint?
Well, what
doing
would be
things?
interesting is I'd be interested to see the breakdown of where that increase has occurred, because you can't always just tell just by sheer numbers. So, for instance, there was this just before the election, if you remember, where there was also this big story about the number of government workers going up. But when you broke down the actual detail, there was people in the COVID response team that weren't going to be there forever. There was people around contact tracing, still in the contact tracing team. There was actually an increase in the police force, and there was also an increase in the head of people actually physically working in Manx care, not managers, but people on the ground as well. Now, so for me, what matters isn't necessarily that number. I think people get distracted by the number. What matters is, what are they doing? Because, for instance, if I said to you, Paul, that next week government headcount has increased by 200, but I then said to you, that's another 100 nurses, another 20 police officers, another 10 firefighters.
So you want some details on this?
You wouldn't be alarmed. But if I said to you, it was 200 civil servants sat at a desk moving paper around, that's two entirely different things. So it's a bit like when we talk about pensions and things like that. People get fascinated with the headline number, whereas actually what matters is the detail behind.
Well, there's lots to come. Anything else in particular before we finish this section? Is there anything like private members' bills or anything you're planning or anything like that?
Not at this current time,
Right.
but I will be pushing again when Tynwald resumes local authority reform.
Oh,
And there will
back on that one?
will be. I had a general debate in July
Yes, but I
at
thought
Tynwald, which allowed members to air their views, so that I could take their views on board, because it was a new house,
Yes.
and also a huge amount of changes in legislative council since I last did it in 2017, I think it was. So I will be coming forward with a motion at some point in the next few
to get an
months.
all-round rate.
Well, I'm not going to say what the motion is at the moment, because that would be discourteous to my Tynwald colleagues. I want to be able to formulate the motion and then speak to my Tynwald colleagues first.
I mean, we've been there how many times? I mean, it seems
We
like
have. I mean, I listed off, I think, in 2017 the number of things, but that just because it's dragged on for over 100 years doesn't mean we should give up on it.
Okay, well, let's finish this with your performance out of out of 10. What you think you've done in the last year? Can you give me a score on how you done?
It's year one of the administration. So as I said in our very first year one interview all those years ago, I think it's very hard to judge at the moment. So I would give myself a 6 or a 7.
Okay, and the government that you were part of, not anymore at the minute, but looking in that tent, and what do you think to Mr. Alf Cannon's leadership and his
Again,
team?
at the moment, I'd say around about a 7.
Okay.
And now the reason, and I always give a reason
Yes,
for this. I don't
yes.
just throw numbers out
Yes.
there. The reason being, it's very early in administration, so it's very hard to judge. If you give a 10 to an administration in the first year, there's nowhere for them to go after that. And I think, it's been very hard for this administration to get itself established at the moment. There's lots that they want to do. It's a very ambitious, a government plan that's Ireland plan that's actually there. And what I want to see is start seeing the delivery. Okay. So they've been very quick on bringing forward the Ireland plan and where they want to go. It's the delivery I want to see, and that's what will up the score.
Going to give you an extra yes or no only answer, yes or no. If you're invited to go and rejoin the government, would you do it?
Yes.